Welcome back to Secret Weapons, and today we're taking a look at The Time by Crazy Tube Circuits. Whenever I'm presented with a digital delay pedal, I generally try to find the lowest fidelity version of it that I can kind of like pull out of it. Maybe it's just my kind of like long, deep background with analog delay. Maybe it's just because I have a love of lo-fi sound in general. I find those 96 kilohertz sample rate, absolute pristine digital delay pedals to be wholly and completely uninteresting to me. I don't like those crystal clear, perfectly pristine delay repeats. I want it to have some kind of grit to it, some saturation that's kind of evocative of like the old school, low resolution digital delays. When Crazy Tube Circuits reached out about doing a video on this, I was immediately intrigued because like, look how good it looks. It looks so vintage and old school and throwbacky. And so I kind of assumed, okay, this can't be your standard fare, perfectly pristine, boring digital delay. And I was right. This is a gritty, fizzy, lo-fi digital delay. Not lo-fi in the sense that you're like losing a ton of tonality, but lo-fi in that sense of it has that grit, it has that saturation, it has that crunchiness as the repeats run away. We're dealing with a really precisely slimmed down pedal here. You've got your mix, your feedback, and your time. You've got a tap tempo with 3 subdivisions. You have your tone and you have your modulation. A straightforward, well-made digital delay. But there's a couple standout things in this pedal that I think are really, really worthwhile. First off is the core repeat quality of this pedal and how the saturation of the repeats reacts to increased input gain, which is just really wonderful. You'll hear that in just a couple of minutes here. Secondly is the modulation control on this thing. At 0, you have no modulation and just your exact note playing back at you with that kind of warm, nostalgic crunch to it. Through the middle, you have a really lush, very nice, well-balanced chorus. But then when you max it out, you actually get to what I'm going to go out on a limb here and say is the only vibrato repeat I've ever liked. I generally keep the modulation levels on my delays pretty subtle because I modulate in other places and I stack a lot of things and it can get a little bit seasick very quickly. But the vibrato on the repeats on this thing is so musical. But the vibrato on the repeats on this thing is so musical and so well executed that you'll hear in a minute. We get sidetracked a few different times just listening to that. You have up to 1 second of delay time on this thing available via the tap tempo, or I think 760 milliseconds on the knob. Your mix doesn't go full wet, but it goes just the correct amount of wet where the repeats are slightly hotter than your dry signal, which can create some really cool textures especially, like I said, if you're digging in really hard with that vibrato. You have the ability to access runaway oscillations by holding your tap tempo or by setting that feedback nice and high. Right around 3 o'clock, you'll get kind of that infinite repeat thing, and beyond that, it starts to kind of run away. That's actually very, very heavily interacted with by the tone control, which gets you bright, crunchy, all the way down to kind of murky and warbly repeats. That tone control will control exactly how fast and how brutally your feedback runs away. And so finding some sweet spots between the two can be a really interesting way to get a lot of cool textures out of just 2 different controls on a pedal like this. This also has a characteristic that I find in a lot of analog delay pedals that I like, which is as you increase your delay time, you decrease your sample rate and you get more noise and grit out of your repeats. So like if you go to the maximum delay time on this, you will get a lot more of that crispy, crunchy repeat that it sits so well with me. Every time I hear a well-tuned, well-filtered delay repeat that has that kind of like lo-fi crunch of overclocking, I get so happy. And I have to say, like, this is one of the most satisfying versions of that I've heard in a long time. It's funny, with a video like this and with a delay like this, there isn't a whole lot to say during this part of the video. There's not a huge list of features we have to run through. There's not like a million parameters or MIDI configuration or anything that you need to know to dive into something like this. With a delay like this, it's really just about how it sounds. And so we're gonna stop talking now and we're gonna go to that pedal board and really dive into why the repeats on the time are so good. Because you just have to listen to it. That's all there is to it. So let's listen to it. So as always, I think it's important to establish context before we start kind of screwing around with the pedal that we're looking at today. So let's talk through our signal chain and what else we're using in this video today. I am playing a Fender Eric Johnson Strat into the 29 Pedals EUNA, the Cali 76 from Origin, the Benson Germanium Boost, the Broken Arrow by Jackson Audio, the Fairfield Circuitry Shallow Water into the Crazy Tube Circuits Time, the Immerse Reverberator, which is outputting in stereo, to the Strymon Iridium set as a Fender amp. So let's give a listen to the EUNA, the 76, the Benson, and the amp. And we'll bring in the reverb and some other stuff as we kind of go down the road. But like I said earlier, I think that the real special thing about this pedal is just how well engineered and how well designed that core low fidelity digital repeat is. So we're going to stay away from reverb for a little bit while we just kind of like take a good hard look at how this thing sounds completely on its own and why that character is so interesting. We've got all of our knobs at noon at the start here, except for the modulation, which we've got turned off so that we can just pay attention to what's happening with the repeats. So let's go ahead and start bringing in, actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and max out the tone and then we'll minimize out the tone and we'll kind of like listen to how much of an impact the tone control in this thing has. You can also hear a lot more of that crunch and an actual longer series of fading repeats when you max out that tone. It interacts very, very specifically with the feedback knob in a way that I really like. Another thing that I think is important to touch on, especially right now with the tone maxed out, is you can really hear how effectively your input gain affects the character of those repeats. As you kind of hit it a little bit harder, you get more saturation in those repeats. So let's dial back the germanium boost a little bit and kind of dig into the guitar and hear how much it kind of breaks up those repeats. And then we'll increase the boost, increase the amount that we're hitting the front end of this pedal, and kind of hear how that makes a difference in the character. I love that. There's something so satisfying about really kind of like driving that simulated preamp in an old school low fidelity digital delay. Especially for kind of those like classic, very U2-y dotted eighth parts, being able to dig in and get a little bit more grit out of those. So we'll do a little bit of that kind of like classic, but with less boost and less saturation. Really great. Okay, let's dial back the tone a little bit. I also think that this is probably the best place to start bringing in that modulation control, because especially when you've got the repeats darkened up a little bit, bringing in that kind of chorusy, vibrato-y modulation can really create a really beautiful, nice swirl and swell underneath it. Something surprising that I find not a lot of delay pedals are able to do is stay really useful with the modulation completely cranked. There's like an almost Leslie quality to it that I really, really think is cool. I think this is probably the right time to start bringing in some reverb to really create kind of a wider space for that warble to exist within. And let's go down to maximum delay time, not full maximum as we discussed earlier. You can get a full second with the tap tempo. We're just going to take it to the maximum delay time available on the knob. Let's see if we can get that right on that perfect edge of oscillation. And you can hear there's a very distinct switch from vibrato to more of a chorused repeat as we dial that back. So this is that very, very kind of classic chorusy sound. And vibrato. And I actually really love how well both of those are dialed, because I can't think of another delay pedal where I've really loved a proper like vibrato modulation on it. But this one sounds amazing, as we just demonstrated. I think it sounds really, really wonderful. Okay, let's play with the time control a little bit. It's another one of those kind of fun quirks of this pedal. It's not really a fluid time knob. It kind of steps as you move it. So we're going to crank that feedback and that brightness and kind of like listen to some of the interesting idiosyncrasies of changing tempos on this pedal. You hear that? It's very, very interesting. Which makes for some very interesting versions of runaway oscillations. And one of the other really nice features about this thing is you don't have to crank the feedback to get those runaway oscillations. Like a lot of tap tempo enabled delays these days, you have the ability to instantly max out your feedback by holding your tap. Yeah, it's very easy to get distracted with that vibrato at the end there. It sounds really, really amazing. I appreciate the kind of like mix parameters. Like I like that that's maximum mix on this. This isn't the kind of pedal I need like a kill drive for.